The Matildas have ended 2024 with 2 consecutive victories over Taiwan in Melbourne, where the sellout streak ended at 16 with just shy of 27,000 turning up on Wednesday night in Melbourne for the first game. An absolutely fantastic crowd for a midweek fixture, but ruining the sellout streak wouldn't happen in a real city like Sydney. Not at all. Well, elsewhere in the dub, a number of results. The Wellington Phoenix get their second victory of the season. Western United claim the points over Sydney FC. Adelaide continue their strong run of form to start the season, as does Fiona Wirtz, who seems to only score from either outside the 18-yard box or inside the 6-yard box, and there's no in-between this season. None at all. While a Melbourne Victory side who were without Emily Gielnik or Alex Chidiac claimed all 3 points in the West at a very hot Sam Kerr football centre. No Emily Gielnik, no Alex Chidiac. If you watch the game, you might have heard that line just a few times. All of this and more, as well as some Futsal Matildas news on this episode of the Dubcast, part of the Round Ball Australia podcast network. Joining me this evening, as always, is Burke. Now, Burke, I understand that you didn't watch a single second of dub action on the weekend because you were out doing your best Formula One impersonations on Sunday.
Yeah, I had my work Christmas party and we went go-karting, which was actually really fun. Although the day after, my shoulder was messed up because I just got smashed by a couple of my colleagues, but that's fine because I take no responsibility for the person that I was in that go-kart. So I got what I deserved.
And joining us once again is Christian Montegan. Now, Christian, do you have any go-karting shenanigans to tell us about?
Mate, I haven't been go-karting in years. So I can't remember the last time I've been. Probably 5-10 years ago. Honestly, can't remember. But if I did drive now, I'd beat you both. So that's the main thing. So we'll leave it at that.
All right. I believe producer Lockie might be listening in. Lockie, there you go. Next year's Christmas party, we're all going to get together in the one city and we're all going to go go-karting. How about that?
That's our unite round.
So as always, we'll start with our big question, or our favourite our storyline. That's what we call it. You can tell it's been a day, and I think both Christian and Burke will agree with me for their respective lives that it has been a day for all of us.
Yep.
Our big storyline. Burke, what was your big storyline in Australian women's football this week?
My big storyline is the Matildas in Geelong getting a crowd of 30K, which is huge for a regional town. I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. And it was a really great atmosphere.
Yeah, I believe the last time they played in Geelong, it was like 6,000 and something. So, absolutely smashing that one out of the park. Leah Davidson, Tamika Yallop, Emily Gielnik, Michelle Heyman, Tash Pryor, and Sian Fryer all found the back of the net in the 6-0 victory in game number 2. Goalkeeper Chloe Lincoln became cap number 233, and Laura Hughes became cap 234 as they made their debuts, being substituted on in the second half, while Claire Polkinghorne left the field for her 169th cap, and the final time that she will play for the national team, or I believe for any club side as well. She also announced her club retirement, although retirements aren't always permanent. Just ask Michelle Heyman about that. Although to be fair, I believe Polks is probably not going to come back in a couple of years' time. Christian, what was your big storyline out of the week?
I mean, you already said it, so I don't know if I can say it, but I was going to say Claire Polkinghorne, her last match, because I think that is very pivotal for the Matildas. We're seeing this old guard, sort of starting to retire, starting to hang up the boots, and it really is a really important period for the Matildas because you look at Football Australia, they're still on the hunt for a new full-time manager. Obviously, Tom Samani is in there for the interim short term. We know that's not going to last forever. I'm just very intrigued to see who this next appointment is so they can quickly assemble this squad, look to the youth, look to the future, and we're going to be seeing, unfortunately, a few more retirements coming in the next 12 to 24 months. So it's exciting at the same time. We get to see, a new crop of young players coming through. We know the talent that's at the Matildas' disposal. But it can be nerve-wracking at the same time for supporters to think, okay, is this a bit of a period where we can suffer a bit of a blip? Are we going to go through a bit of a rough patch? So, yeah, there are a couple of questions still to answer.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely an interesting period, as you said, because you've got the aging squad, and we sort of well, I say we, um, you know, Jacob and Burke, I believe, along with Chris McPherson, touched on it last week. As I put it in the rundown, just the sheer amount of um, the players who are sort of either in their 30s or nearing their 30s. Steph Catley at 30, Katrina Gorry at 32, Van Egmond at 31, Alana Kennedy at 29, Tamika Yallop at 33, Sam Kerr at 31, Caitlin Ford at 30, and Haley Razzo at 30. With Michelle Heyman at 36, who probably won't make the World Cup, just by sheer factor of age. I mean, Gallup, what's going to happen there? She'll be 36 by the time the World Cup rolls around. Is a 35-year-old Katrina Gorry, who's already hinted at retirement, going to be there? I mean, so as much as the idea around this two-game Taiwan series was sort of being sold to the public as Generation Next. If I have to hear that phrase one more time, I might just scream. Um, I'm all for open communication, but there's a little bit overdoing it. But it's a reality that these players aren't going to be around forever, and a lot of them are probably looking at their last hurrah. I mean, looking at Sam Kerr, there's no guarantee she's going to return from injury as the same player she was, and so
And
it's
just to cut in, I
really.
mean, these are players that have debuted at what, from 15, 16 years of age. Like, they've been in this setup for like what, 2 decades almost, some of these players. So, once you start to lose that experience, it can be problematic. Once it eventuates to see all these new faces coming through, it is going to take a bit of time to adjust. And I think that is the worry for some fans.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a completely fair um, concern to have. Just the way that it sort of turned out. But you know, we saw what the next generation can do in these games. Like I put the question to the Far Post podcast. And this wasn't even me being facetious, but like if you look at the way things are going, um, what could a defensive back three look like with Kayla Morrison, Claire Hunt, and Tash Pryor there? Not suggesting in any way that I think Alana Kennedy should be forced out, but it's presents the idea that do we need to maybe speed up that process and maybe Alana Kennedy becomes a bench player, or is it Kayla Morrison on the bench when FIFA provides clearance if the new coach decides they want to go with the back three? And so I guess rather than sort of break down the two games as we have it, Tash Pryor, Sean Fryer, Briley Henry scored in the 3-1 victory on the Wednesday night. First time since 2007 that the Matildas have conceded a goal against Taiwan. Leah Davidson capped 232. Is what happens, and Burke, I'll come to you on this one. What happens when the She Believes Cup rolls around in February? Do the Matildas have a new coach in place, and how do you think that squad looks?
If the Matildas don't have a new coach in place, oh, it it's not good. We like, God bless Tom Samani, love him, lovely guy. But we cannot keep just rolling over these like monthly contracts for him. We need to start getting serious. I know it's I was talking to a couple of other journos at like the both of the games, and they were saying the hard part about getting the coach is because of a lack of competitive fixtures. So they were expecting that with the announcement of us playing in the She Believes Cup, they should again have that kind of carrot to dangle out and over them all to be like, hey, you want to do this? You want to come to She Believes? And I hope they do. I hope they want to come to She Believes. I need them to. Um, yeah, so I'm expecting we have a new coach by then, a permanent head coach, not an interim head coach. Um, couldn't tell you who it's going to be. Even like speculation at this point, I couldn't even speculate. But yeah, it's important that we get it done and get it right, which is everything that everyone else has been saying. I I would like I would love to see Kayla Morrison get a call up, but yeah, it's going to depend on the new coach and who what sort of football they want us to play and how they want us to play it and who they want playing this football. So I think it's really, unfortunately, a lot of it is really dependent on who we end up hiring. So yeah, speculate. You can make all the speculations you want. Sorry. But yeah, we're not really going to be able to think up anything definite or close to definite until we get that name.
I mean, I'm sure if the new coach has enough journalists hounding them about Kayla Morrison in the press conference, where is Kayla Morrison? Why don't you have Kayla Morrison? When are we getting Kayla Morrison? And so on. So please, Kayla Morrison. Um, they might just give her a debut out of spite to shut everyone up.
Yeah,
Um,
there's that
I
too.
mean, for me, the name that keeps floating around my head is Casey Stoney. It's she's been out there for a while since after her unceremonious departure, shall we say, from San Diego Wave, um, after being fired by Jill Ellis, who was also left the San Diego Wave for a job at FIFA. Um, I did see today that Angel City have fired their coach. I mean, California,
Yeah,
same
that.
city. You
Yeah.
know, I know that Stoney and her family lost their visas. Could that be a move to go back and rule her out of the Matildas job, Burke?
I would say probably. Honestly, I don't like. I would also love Casey Stoney because she's a very defensive-minded coach. And like Christian was saying earlier, the loss of Polks will leave us a bit um, sort of out to sea in that sort of regard. So I think she'd be a great appointment in that sense. But because she has a very young family and has been burned before, I would completely understand if she doesn't want to take that risk again and instead wants to go back home and kind of, yeah, see what she can work out there. I would love for her to be the Matilda's coach. I think it'd be really interesting and great for us to have a female head coach. Obviously, she isn't tested at an international level, blah, 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 but like you have to be tested at some point. Like you don't just come, like coaches are built, they don't come with the experience. They have to find it somewhere. So I don't see why we couldn't be the ones. But I do understand that the like personal family situation for her is very different, and I could understand why that might keep her from us. Although Australia is a lovely
Yeah.
place to raise a family, I will say.
I mean, we've certainly had a number of foreigners in both competitions. Kayla Morrison as one of those who've come to Australia and just fallen in love with it and decided to stay and make it their home. So I'm just saying, great point, Burke. But Christian, just to build off that, one of the things that I guess has been touted over the years is the idea that coaching the Australian national team is a very unappealing job in the sense that the bulk, and this applies for both the men's and the women's, is that a big core of the squad is based in Europe and have to travel long distances every time they play home games. You've got the idea of, depending on where you're coming from, talent might be an issue comparatively speaking, and that's maybe less of an issue with the Matildas, who is sort of like one of the more talented sides in world football. But you've got the long distances. Essentially, you have to relocate for the length of the contract. Regardless of what happens. I mean, then there's also the money issue. The federation isn't exactly splashed with cash, so I guess I guess what I'm sort of want to get at is how does the FA overcome those sorts of issues to attract a new coach, given that time is really like it's still like I think it's 13 months before the Asian Cup on home soil, but they don't play any games in the next 2 months. It's February for the She Believes Cup, and then which is the closest they'll get to competitive football until the Asian Cup. So, how does the FA overcome all those issues, given that they are essentially running out of time?
Mm. I mean, they're all valid points you raise. I mean, how can the FA sell it? I guess they've got to, whoever is in charge, they've got to say to them, look, you're going to be given a lot of time. It's not going to be a pressure situation where, if you lose a few games or if you have a bad Asian Cup, then, your job's on the line. I think this is going to have to take a bit of a rebuilding process, and whoever comes in is going to have to accept that, right? And I guess their reputation is a bit on the line as well, because it's not going to be an easy job. I know it is stacked with talent, this squad, but at the same time, we are seeing obviously countries in Europe, for example, they're investing a lot of money into it. You touched on the finances as well, Poletti, where there's not going to be, that side of it is going to be a bit of an issue as well. So, like, yeah, there are a few obstacles, for whichever manager does decide to fill in Tom Samani's shoes, but yeah, it sort of depends on how much courage this particular coach, male or female, is willing to take that risk, because like I said, it's not gonna be an overnight job, right? We're gonna have to fill in some inexperienced players. Like we mentioned before, the experienced crop are going to be leaving soon, so again, it's all this sort of rebuilding process where you need to put your ideas in place, the structure, the tactics. I mean, this thing takes time, because even like you mentioned, Poletti, players traveling from overseas, it's not like a club where you're training week in, week out, right? You get these players for sometimes once every 3 months or thereabouts, even longer. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's going to be a really big task for whoever does opt to take the job. I just hope that the FA do give them a lot of time to say, and just confirm to them, just assure them that they will have the time available to make the changes and go from there.
Yeah, so just on the Asian Cup that you mentioned, it is the last tournament that's going to be linked to World Cup qualifying in the AFC. Um, so the AFC have 6 slots of automatic qualification up for grabs, and then there's a 10-team playoff tournament in which the AFC has 2 slots. So in a 12-team tournament, you'd believe, particularly on home soil, that the Matildas have enough. But we've also had very disastrous AFC Asian Cup campaigns in recent memory. So not quite automatic, but should be reasonable enough that, yeah, maybe, only making the semi-finals, wouldn't be too bad of a result.
Mm.
I just before we move on, I am working on an article at the moment where we're sort of looking at some of the big questions around the Matildas, and the one that I keep coming back to is player usage. And I know that you sort of touched on last week. I did want to read a quote here, or just a comment from a listener. Is inclined to agree the international friendlies are just a circus show. Doesn't really put too much importance on them, but then gets onto Emily Van Egmond. It seems to be a big consensus from the geniuses of Oz football social media that she's past it, whereas I'm with the truther, and I believe the truther is you, Burke, based on my listening of the podcast last week. So that's your new nickname now. We often play her in
I'll take
positions
it.
that shackle her attacking strengths and make her do lots of defending, which she is just okay at. Um, this idea behind player usage, is that something, Burke, that you feel the new Matildas coach, whoever they may be, might be able to solve? Because you've got the Emily Van Egmond situation where she's routinely being played out of position. No one seems to know outside of Jeff Hopkins how to use Alex Chidiac in Australia. Mary Fowler is, and Tony said this, as my cats decide they want to tear the house down. um, uh, Tony Gustafson said that he was never quite able to find the right position for Mary Fowler because she can play in so many different places on the field. And then you've got the idea of having to bring in new personnel and all that sorts of things. So just how does the new coach, whoever they may be, actually solve the usage around the usage of the right players?
Honestly, I think if you want to be like deadly serious about it, it's all it takes is playing the best players in their natural positions. And if that means you have to find potentially some new ones, I guess that's what you have to do. You don't like we have defensive midfielders. We have Claire Wheeler. We have Claire Wheeler at home. We don't. She's at Everton, but we have her. She can do it. We have just had a few defensive midfield options pop up in the last two games. We don't. No more Emily Van Egmond at defensive midfield. I've had enough of Emily Van Egmond at defensive midfield. I think she's had enough. We've all had enough. You could see, I think she had more room in the last game against Chinese Taipei, Taiwan. And you could see just how much better the flow was, how much more interesting the football was. And yeah, I think it's just a case of letting everyone play in their best positions. Like when you don't try and well, actually she kind of refuted that point, but Tamika Yallop what in right back for one of the games? Let's not do that ever again. Let's not do that. We don't need to do that. And we shouldn't be doing that. I'm very much a firm believer that players should play their natural position, and if not their natural position, the best position, like the next best available. But yeah, if anything, the coach honestly should just ask all the players, be upfront and be like, hey, tell me where you think you're best. We'll work it out from there. Like just go all the way back to the basics with it, because we can't keep doing this, like trying to put a circular piece in a triangular shaped hole. Like it's coming back to bite us really badly.
I just had a slight chuckle there because you're saying you're putting the circle piece in the triangle. Oh, I'm not sure if either of you two are familiar with the TikTok, where it's like you've got she's watching the video of like
Oh,
where all the different shapes go in the hole, and it's just like
yeah.
it goes in the square hole. Ah!
It goes in the
Like
square hole.
it's literally
I do know that one. I
yes.
don't have TikTok, but I am familiar with that one. So.
Yeah, so that just popped into my head. Another thing that popped into my head as well is I can imagine how those conversations are going to go with the new coach when they get to Caitlin Torpey. So, Caitlin, what do you feel is your best position? Yes,
Yes. And you know what? If anyone's allowed to do that, it's her. She can do that. I'll let her do that.
Christian, have you got anything else that you wanted to talk about as it comes to the Matildas before we move on to the dub?
No, I think we've covered everything, to be honest. I think it's time for a bit of dub talk.
And we shall jump straight into that, moving across the ditch. Wellington Phoenix 2, Brisbane Roar 1. It's now 2 straight wins for Wellington after their 1-0 victory over Adelaide at Unite Round. Captain Annalie Longo returned from injury and scored a brace offside shouts aside for the first goal. Emily Pringle scored the lone goal for the Roar, capitalising on a defensive error for the Knicks, where the entire defence basically switched off just before half time. The Raw were without Tamika Yallop and Sean Fryer for this one. And Evdokia Popodanova suffered an apparent hamstring injury early in the second half. Christian, I mean, for me, I think the big standout for this game was just how well the Wellington Phoenix defense held up, that defensive error aside just before half time. Mackenzie Barry and Tiana Jaber really stood out for me in defense and sort of allowed Wellington to control the game.
Yeah, I think you've seen throughout parts of the first few games of the season, Paul Temple, his frustrations about the defense, and you can see what he's trying to get at. Just the players just haven't been able to execute. And I thought, yeah, this is a result that sort of took me a bit by surprise. I'm sure you both were the same, just based on the form of the two sides going into it. I mean, you can say Brisbane didn't have their chances in the first half, or they didn't take their chances with a couple of really threatening opportunities, but ultimately that mistake playing out from the back towards the back end of that first half was just an absolute killer for any manager watching that unfold, because I think the pass was made by Leah Varley, I think it was, just an absolute hospital ball, and provided absolute gift, which was so avoidable. And look, I wouldn't say it's back to normal for Brisbane in the sense that they might regress back down to the mean, because, like I said, they created goal scoring chances. And if Pringle was a bit more, I guess, clinical in front of goal, especially in that first half, then we're talking a completely different game. So, again, Valley was at fault for the second goal a bit, because I think she could have done better with the clearance, the header. But I think away from home, it was never going to be a guaranteed 3 points. I think there's just more to do with the Phoenix and how well they played. I think finally they're trying to find a bit of consistency now, and hopefully for their sake, they can continue on this run.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a lot of this comes down to the fact, you can't just replace Sean Fry. You can't just replace Tamika Yallop in this Brisbane side. That's not to say that the result would have been different, but I think their absence was very, very clear in this one. No update on Popadanova as to how long she may or may not be out. I mean, we've already seen what looked like a very nasty hamstring injury this season to 18 Keane, and she was back in less than 2 weeks. So you have to keep a lookout on that one. Burke, I guess just sort of like an overall question. It's now two straight victories for the Phoenix. How do they take this momentum and build on it for the season, knowing that Paul Temple has said finals is the goal?
I think they really just have to take the confidence, because Brisbane Roar are a great team. They've been playing really well. Adelaide were definitely not at their best last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, for Unite round. But it's the best team on the day that wins. And they, yeah, were the best team, well, that 2 weeks ago and today. Obviously, there'll be, a bit of chat about the offside call, but this is the greatest league in the world that does not have VAR, so you're just going to have to, unfortunately, take that one as it is. Brisbane Roar fans, I'm very sorry for that, but Annalie Longo simply wanted to win that game, so she did. Yeah, they just
And
have to back themselves from here, I think, because they've shown they can do it against quality opponents. There's no reason why they can't or why they shouldn't continue.
and may we never have VAR in this league. Um, we'll head to Tarneit now. Western United 2, Sydney FC 1. Carly Johnson opened the scoring in the 55th minute before Western United found out what everyone in NPL New South Wales has found out over the last 12 months, and that is indeed that Amber has the answer, as Amber Luchtmeyer scored her first goal in the A-League women's competition in the 58th minute before Chiara Di Demetrio gave Western United the win in the 88th with her first touch of the game, um, creating space at the near post from a corner to head it home. Carly Johnson took the strike just outside the 18-yard box, perhaps confusing Talia Franco, in my opinion at least, who might not have been expecting a shot. Talia Franco in her first action this season, and indeed since the 2022-23 season at an A-League women level, after not playing a minute in the 2023-24 season, with Jada Wyman playing every minute of every game. Um, and I guess that, Christian, that's where I was sort of want to start. We saw Bree Edwards during Unite round have that big error, which led to Melbourne City's goal. Ante sort of brushed it off post game, saying, oh, "Look, it's a mistake. She's a young player. She's going to make them." And sort of just very much just brushed it off as sort of like a non-story. But then the next time Sydney play, Talia Franco, who hasn't played a minute at an A-League women level in basically a season and a half, you know, gets her first start of the season. Am I being crazy trying to read anything into this, or is it like a genuine? Is it a genuine question that needs to be asked? What's going on? uh, at the goalkeeper position for Sydney FC?
Um, I mean, there could be something in it. I think Juric is just trying to find that balance, and it's not a case of not trusting a young player. I mean, if he sees something else that we're not seeing behind the scenes, whether it be in training or whatnot, if there's other goalkeepers that are performing better, then obviously he's going to make that decision, right? I know it does look bad considering the mistakes you made that you touched on, and perhaps that was the reason why. It could be, it might not be, it could be something completely different or a combination of different factors. We're just not 100% sure what it is. But we do know that Juric, he does tend to find the balance as the season progresses. And I know you're going to come to that question soon about, will Sydney click into gear, which, yeah, we'll talk about a bit later. But I guess, yeah, for Juric, it's just about can he find that balance between, a couple of really exciting prospects in terms of youth and just the experienced players, and trying to, I guess, find that good mix, because at the moment it just seems a bit all over the place, a bit congested. They look lost for ideas at times, and in this game in particular, credit to Western United, because I thought it was a complete mature performance from their end. They knew when to take the sting out of the game. They knew when to take the opportunities and go forward. Slow the game down when they needed to. And for Sydney, we're usually so accustomed to seeing once they score that goal, the equaliser, 3 minutes after they went behind, you go, all right, this is Sydney going to turn it on. This is where they're going to pounce. They're going to, seize the moment where they can sense the opposition defense is going to be vulnerable. But again, that was credit to Western United for not folding and keeping up that pressure and intensity, and that goes to Cat Smith as well, who I thought got a tactic spot on again in this match. So yeah, from a Sydney point of view, their fans are obviously going to be a bit worried now. They're 10th in the table, third bottom. So definitely did not see that coming before the start of the season. So whether they can change things up, whether there'll need to be more drastic changes, we'll have to wait and see, because it's definitely not just a goalkeeper issue, that's for sure.
Yeah, we did get a question in from a listener. Tim Coughlin on Blue Sky said that he made his first visit to Tane on the weekend. That the game was played in high wind, and given the location of the ground is completely unprotected, is likely to be a regular occurrence. Can we see Western United developing tactics around this to make Ironbark Fields a feared away trip for other teams? Burke, you're the only one here who has been to Ironbark Fields and has experienced the weather conditions out there. Is it something that might be possible for Western United to develop into a tactical advantage, or is the direction and ferocity of the wind just so unpredictable on a game to game basis that it would be harder to actually game plan around that?
I think I'm gonna have to say it's gonna be too unpredictable because the land there is really flat. There is nothing, like there's no buffers or anything like that. So if the wind's on, the wind's on. If it's not, it's not. I guess if they have it as like a contingency plan where they show up on the day and see, yeah, we've got a good, strong headwind, we're going to execute X, Y, and Z, long balls, whatever, then I could see it working for them. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's going to be too unpredictable. Good question, though. Very, very interesting, and hadn't really thought of that. But it had been windy both times, more so the first time that I went there than the second. So yeah, unpredictable.
I mean, we all, if you recall back to a couple of weeks ago, Chris McPherson sort of became our resident horticulturalist as we looked at the state of the Leichhardt Oval pitch. Burke, I'm going to make you our resident architect. Is there a way that perhaps they could construct around the stadium to create a wind tunnel to sort of control the way that
They
the weather
could,
behaves?
but that would cost money and that would take time. And I don't think we've got enough time in the season for them to get a wind tunnel up and running. It'd be very funny if they did though. Just get some like pallets
Maybe
or
next year.
something. There's lots of construction and stuff happening down there. They can borrow some materials.
Um, we'll take one last look at Sydney FC here. 10th place, one win, one draw, three losses. It's a question that sort of everyone's been asking, and I sort of don't want to keep harping on it, but I think as the season continues, it does become a legitimate. It becomes more and more of a legitimate question, Christian. When do they click into gear and sort of become the Sydney FC that we all know and love? Well,
I
I
mean,
say know and love, knowing full well that there's someone on this call who doesn't.
I was about to say, hopefully never. They can just stay to, hopefully find the wooden spoon and we can settle it there because they've been at the top for, forever. So it'll be nice to see them, get last place, get a wooden spoon finish, get a bit of something different. I'm joking. But I don't know. I'm trying to look at the fixture here. I mean, they're at home to Newcastle next, away to Wellington, and then they've got the big two. They've got Victory and City, both at home. Like these next two fixtures are obviously really crucial, right? If they don't pick up points there, you're looking at potentially another further two losses against Victory and City. Very much possible. I mean, do they have the talent? Yes, on paper, they are still a great side. I mean, yeah, they lost a couple of players in the off season, but their core essentially is still relatively there. Same coach. So, I mean, you just have to put it down to it's just going to take some time to find that cohesion again. And for some clubs, it takes a bit more time, than others. I mean, for a Eurich side at Sydney, it doesn't normally take this long to settle in. I mean, I noticed, seasons gone past, he has had a couple of seasons where he has started a bit slowly, but then like a Jeff Hopkins and Victory, they do generally start to find their form and click into gear. It could be another case here, but yeah, I don't think you have to pinpoint it to one specific problem. I think there are a few on the pitch that Juric does have to sort out, shape being one of them, because I think at times they are, sort of spread out all over the place at times. They don't look as in sync as we have seen in previous seasons. So, I mean, you probably have a better answer, Poletti, as to why. But there are, I think, a few problems that, Juric will have to solve.
I actually don't, because
Yeah.
I don't I don't quite like I get what's happening. I get that there's been squad turnover. I get that there's been a big recruit of younger players, and it's sort of become a regeneration project in stages. But Ante's always been able to get the best out of this side, and like I know, like even when they have started slow, as he's kept alluding to, there's still been the signs there that they're going to turn it around and they're going to do so quickly, and that it's just a matter of time. I don't quite see how that's going to happen this time around. And I think that's what's the most concerning, is that there's no obvious, well, okay, we can take this away, we can take that away, and be like, okay, if they can combine this section of this game together and that section of that game together, and this section from a third game together, and put them all together in one 90-minute performance, then they're gonna, get back on the right path, and they'll be able to do that for a season once they work out how to do that. I haven't seen enough so far across the 5 games they've played to sort of be like, okay, 10-minute spell here, 15-minute spell here, you put it all together and you get one 90-minute juggernaut to put together. But I mean, look, if there's going to be any coach in the competition who's going to work it out, it is going to be Ante Juric. So it could just be a case of we'll have to wait and see
So you're
what
saying
happens.
Sydney are going to miss out on finals. He's telling us there's a chance. There's a slight chance that Sydney are going to miss out on finals. Come on, give us a hope.
I mean, there's always a slight chance of anything happening in this glorious, glorious league, as Burke returns with a smile on her face. Look, I'm not going like, unlike uh, unlike in the men's competition, I'm not putting the line through anyone in the dub. Just given how crazy this league has been in the past in terms of turning around results this early in the season. But we'll move to Adelaide, to Newcastle Jets nil. Fiona Worth with the brace, continuing her close goal scoring form of inside the 6 yard box, with her two very very close range goals. One from, I'd probably say, 10 centimeters out, and the other from just inside the 6 yard box. Danielle Krasniak handled the ball outside the box for the second time this season, although only picking up a yellow this time. She did seem to claim it inside the box and then stepped out, which would be a reason for the lesser punishment, as opposed to what she did in, I want to say it was round 2, where, oh my gosh, that was the reddest of red cards I've ever seen. In the other goal, Claudia Jenkins continues her impressive season as Adelaide got towards the clean sheet. I mean, I don't have too much to say about this game, Christian. I don't know about you. It was just a very clinical performance from Adelaide.
I don't either, to be honest. I didn't watch much of this game. I didn't get to catch most of it. But looking at this result, I mean, again, Adelaide. Like before the season started, we were thinking, okay, maybe they might pick up two, three, four wins throughout the whole season. And how many wins have they got now? I think they've got three or four already. So, I mean, a good bounce back from that defeat against Wellington. I think they can definitely make finals now. I mean, they've got that belief. I'm just so impressed with their intensity with the previous games I've seen them play this season. We just didn't see any of that of any sort last season. They just look lifeless, and this season it seems to be all clicking into gear. Defensively, the structure is much, much better. So I think that's where they want to begin, right? They want to have a good, solid foundation at the back and then work their way forward. So you can finally start to see a bit of an identity occurring. It's just whether they can, keep their players fit and healthy, keep this momentum going because, if they make finals, they can cause, one or two surprises if they do keep on this trajectory. And we would not have been saying that before the season started.
I love how you said you have absolutely nothing to say and then just go on a 2 minute monologue. It's brilliant.
I was just going from the previous games that I've watched, so I watched a bit of the highlights, but I didn't watch the full 90 of this one.
Burke, do you have any thoughts at all on either Adelaide or Newcastle, or are we good to move on to Perth and
I
victory?
all I saw was the goals, and Fiona Worts, very good. Also, is now equal top of the Golden Boot chase with Emily Gilnick. Both have 6 goals, which is very impressive of her. So that's all. Yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, she certainly seems to be taking a revenge tour out on the entire competition as she returns to Adelaide. Dude, this is who I am. You remember who I am. Sort of vibe I'm getting from Fiona Worth this season. So Perth Glory 0, Melbourne Victory 1. Very hot conditions at the Samco Football Centre. Really impacted this game. I think the best way I can explain how the heat looked like it impacted is the fact that there were drinks breaks, the fact that it was a 5 p.m. local time kickoff, and we know that there have been later kickoffs in Perth to accommodate with the time zones as well. So I think this might have been a lighting issue, which is why they maybe couldn't have delayed kickoff because the ground might not have adequate lighting, whereas last season Macedonia Park did. So that could be a big problem for Perth this season as we come into summer, trying to have to navigate lighting towards the back end of a match. They will welcome in Adelaide this week. It's also a 5 p.m. kickoff local time at the Samco Football Centre, so we'll have to wait and see whether it's another hot kickoff. Only 10 shots in the game from Perth. One of those on target from Kelly Brown. Routine save for Courtney Newbon. Victory had a chance to go ahead with a Rachel Lowe penalty, who took not a great penalty. I know I've been very vocal about my idea of players with their run-ups not being able to do the stutter, not being able to do the tricks or anything like that. But I definitely don't think the solution is going in off a single step, giving Casey Dumont in her 150th A-League Women appearance a very, very routine save. Alana Murphy, late in stoppage time, scored from nearly 30 metres out at a shot I'm going to say Casey Dumont wasn't expecting. Either that or she lost it in the sea of players around her. But you gotta buy a ticket to win the lottery, and Alana Murphy certainly tried her luck and was successful as Victory going to second on the ladder, just a point behind rivals Melbourne City. I mean, for me, I think it's tough, right? Because Victory are beginning to make a very, very concerning habit of leaving it late to get points this season. But I mean, Christian, if it works, right?
No, exactly. I mean, if you've got to put it down to, it was an incredibly gutsy win from a victory point of view in a very difficult place to travel, as we know. And on top of that, with the heat, as you touched on, Poletti. So, yeah, it was your, I guess, typical Jeff Hopkins managed back to the wall display, if that makes sense. I mean, even when things weren't going according to plan in stages of the match, whether it be a breakdown in play or just little things like that, you always sense that there was at least going to be one moment that would turn this game on its head. And we thought it would be the penalty that was obviously saved by Casey Dumont. But obviously it was the Alana Murphy strike. from outside the box, 92nd minute. And it's funny because in that heat, you'd expect a lot of shots from outside the area. That was probably one of the few that any player sort of attempted in that match and it pulled off. So yeah, I thought both teams tried to really advance inside the box, and it's just a matter of just not being able to take the opportunities. And this Perth side, I just worry in front of goal who's going to find, the goals, who's going to have the goal scoring boots to put the chances away. And that goes for a few clubs in this competition as well who have that same issue, as we've touched on in previous podcasts. So yeah, for a victory standpoint, I do agree with your sentiment that if they keep on this sort of run where they've got to keep finding late winners, is going to pose as a bit of a problem moving forward. But at the same time, early on the season, as opposed to Sydney, who are struggling and can't even grind out those wins, you've got to obviously take the positive that 3 points on the road in Perth. You've just got to take the wins as you can this early on, and just hope, from a victory perspective, that they can again sort of click into gear and find, I guess, that mojo that we know they're capable of under Hopkins. It's just, can they find that balance?
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting sort of approach to watch the victory over the
Mm.
next couple of weeks. Will be answering those sorts of questions. Burke, before we move on, 150 appearances in the A League Women for Casey Dumont. She missed the first couple of games last season. She missed the first couple of games this season because of her AFLW commitments with Hawthorn. I mean, we're talking 10 game seasons, 11 game seasons for a lot of her career as well. She becomes the first goalkeeper to reach 150 appearances. Just a magnificent knock from Dumont, isn't it?
It's unreal, especially considering we've had like the 10 game seasons. Like, if you're racking up 150 appearances, you've been here for a very, very long time. I'd be so interested to hear her perspective of the growth of the league, just because I know she's been here forever. But yeah, it's a massive achievement. It's not something you see even with a lot of like outfield players either. So it's massive. Huge congratulations to Casey. And yeah, she's probably pretty happy with the result regardless, because she got that penalty save, because it's always good to have.
Yeah, I mean, I did have a look at the list, which I don't have in front of me right now. But like Michelle Heyman at the top of the list, 174 appearances, I believe it is off the top of my head. And then it's sort of like, if you look at the list, it's Tamika Yalla, then it's Kim Carroll, it's Cass Davis, and sort of like, I mean, Claire Polkinghorne, and then Caitlin Cooper, Gemma Simon, Emma Checker, um, and then Casey Dumont is sort of like the top 10. Teresa Polias, I believe her appearance count is including finals, but I could be wrong on that, off the top of my head. No, sorry, no. So that's including her time at the Mariners. I forgot she was part of the Mariners. You just associate Teresa Polias with Sydney FC. Um, Speaking of Sydney FC and record-breaking appearances, Princess Sabini is set to take over Sydney FC's all-time appearance record on the women's side, with 146 if she plays on Saturday, overtaking the aforementioned Teresa Polias. Now, if you're asking, hang on, wasn't that game on Sunday? It was. With Leichhardt Oval being in the state that it is, Sydney FC have moved that game to the Sydney Football Stadium, and it'll now be the second half of the double header, with the men facing Western United at 5 p.m. So Sydney FC versus Newcastle Jets will kick off at 7:45 p.m. I mean, I've made my position on double headers quite clear, I think, but I'd also rather them play at a stadium with a quality surface, Burke, rather than whatever state Leichhardt Oval's in.
Yeah, yeah, as annoying as the double headers are, good for them for being able to find a curtain raiser so last minute. Yeah, glad to see that they've been able to move that for that. But yeah, Princess Zabini, I've just checked, is only 24, which is an insane age to be making 146 league appearances in. So yeah, players that have been around a long time. She's on the list.
I mean, she made her debut when she was 15. So this is a 10th season with Sydney FC, which is absolutely insane. Um, in that time, I had it up here: 28 goals in 145 games, which isn't a bad return, given that she doesn't always play in the most attacking of roles. Um, 8 grand finals, the most of any player in A League women history. I mean, it's absolutely insane. 8 appearances for the Matildas. Like, honestly, like it's scary to look at the fact that she may still have another 10 years in her and could like if there was any player I was going to back to become the first to reach 300 appearances at this point, it's got to be Princess Sabini, right, Christian?
I mean, probably, but again, at the same time, is it sort of a shock that she hasn't made that move overseas yet, given that she spent, what, 10 seasons, I think you said, with Sydney? I don't know. Like, she's one of those players who she shows that flashes of brilliance at times, but I just want to see a bit more from her. Again, it's an incredible achievement, obviously, to get that number 146 at her age, 24. That's absolutely remarkable. I just want to see a bit more output. I hope Juric can just play her in that position, the attacking third, where she's more comfortable, even a bit more out wide, where she can utilize her pace and her skill, just to take on her player in a 1v1 situation, just give her that bit more freedom. But no, in terms of the achievement, just obviously terrific, and hopefully for Sydney's sake she can stay on for at least a couple more seasons.
Burke, any final thoughts on Princess Sabini before we move on?
No, no. I think everything's been said.
All right. So the APL have announced that Melbourne City's round 20 A-League women fixture versus Western United has been shifted to Tuesday, the 4th of February, in order to accommodate Melbourne City's AFC Women's Champions League quarter-final commitments. The match will now kick off at 5 p.m. local time. Christian, elsewhere, Football Australia have announced a 24-player squad for the Australian women's national futsal team selection camp. Miles Downey has been named the head coach by Football Australia. He also coaches the Futsal Roos. 24-player squad is to determine the final 14-player squad for the AFC Women's Futsal Asian Cup qualifiers, which will take place in China later in 2025. Australia have been drawn into Group C alongside host nation Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, the Philippines, and Kuwait. One important thing to note from the press release from Football Australia is that due to the timing of the AFC Women's Futsal Asian Cup qualifiers, several players are unavailable for selection due to their respective Ninja A-League and club commitments. I mean, there's been a lot of futsal players come through the competition over the years, but this will be the first time I believe that Australia has had a women's futsal team, which sort of shows the growth of the sport in the country, the investment from Football Australia, and just how they're going about it.
Yeah, I mean, could this have been scheduled at a different time, or was this the only sort of time
Uh,
slot
with
in terms of
with
those?
the tournament being the qualifiers being played from the 11th to the 19th, it kind of has to be
Yeah.
sort of dealt with now. What I think is the interesting note about that comment there in the press release of several players unavailable due to A League women commitments is it only specifies it's for the qualifiers, not necessarily for the tournament proper. Should Australia qualify?
Mm.
I don't have the date in front of me on when that game or when that tournament actually takes place, but I assume
Mm.
it would take place in the A League Women off season, which might
Yeah.
allow some of the futsal players who partake in the A League Women to participate should they be selected, which could really change the makeup of the squad. So the 24 players: Daisy Arrowsmith, Jessica Au, Trudy Camilleri, Aurelia Collins, Jessica Dillon, Emily Dunn, Sarah Easthope, Estelle Fregale, Claudia Scalzo, Claire Holder, Alexia Carastal, Demi Koulizakis, Sophie Magus, Megan McElligott, uh, Jessica McLean, Sarah Moore, Kazan Mulder, Rachel Perrins, Sophia Paliwoda, Hallie Schmidt, Zoe Spadano, Mariana Tabane, Natalie Tatham, and Michaelia Thornton. A lot of those names I'm incredibly familiar with because a lot of them were playing their trade in the NPL Women's New South Wales last season. I'm fully going to admit I have not seen them on a futsal court. But if they're anywhere near as talented as they are on an NPL Women's New South Wales pitch, then this is actually a pretty good squad to choose from. And Miles Downey is going to have his work cut out for him as that selection camp gets underway. I believe it's the 16th to the 20th of December, so next week is when it'll take place. And I imagine that the squad selection will be announced, I'd say, last week of December, first week of January, before the before the qualifiers in Uzbekistan. Last question before we sign off that we received from WSW Tommy on Blue Sky. Thank you for your question, Tommy. Greatly appreciate it. Do the Wanderers need to spend a few years in purgatory like the Mariners did to get their stuff together? I mean, for me, this is an interesting one. And I'm assuming he's referring to the Mariners men, unless by
Mm,
purgatory he means out of the competition entirely, which I don't think that's. I certainly don't think that's the implication here from Tommy.
mm,
Um, but I mean, the Wanderers are sort of already in purgatory. Like outside of last season, the only
mm,
time they've come close to competing was when they had Denise O'Sullivan in, I want to say it was the 2016-17 season, or it might have been the 2015-16 season. Other than that, they've sort of really been uncompetitive.
mm.
I mean, they've got the academy now after taking over the Football New South Wales Institute sort of license when that program was made. When the decision to shut that program was made by Football New South Wales, the Wanderers have taken that over. But I mean, I don't know. It's sort of like you get something like last year where it's like, okay, it looks
Mm.
like something can happen here, and then you get what they've shown through 5 games this season, where they've only got a single point. Christian, and I'd be fascinated to hear your thoughts as someone who's not in Sydney. Um, you know, what do the Wanderers do?
I guess they're a club who do have the resources, right? I mean, I think that's not the problem. I think last season, I just think they shoot themselves in the foot at times. I mean, they had Kat Smith before the season, sacked her for sort of unknown reasons. Like it's little stuff like that, giving debuts to players who are, significantly young. We questioned that last season, whether that was the right move for a club who were struggling at the start of the season. Are you exposing them to, these bad results? Does that knock their confidence? It's just like these little things like that can sort of, you know, derail you and put you off track because like, do they have an identity? Like when I watch them play, you sort of don't see it week in, week out. Like you see glimpses, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the long term, perhaps they just need to completely, throw everything out the window and just start from scratch. Maybe focus a bit more on youth. If they're not that ambitious in the transfer market, if they're not signing, high quality players, in their prime, then I guess, turn to youth is your option. I know they do have a couple in their ranks at the moment, but perhaps that's the way forward because, if they don't sort of plan anything behind the scenes in that respect, then it's sort of hard to see where they're going to go, going for the next 5 years or so. Are they going to contest the championship sooner rather than later? It's going to take a bit of time, obviously, but I just think making the right decisions up the top is going to be key for them to, just find a bit of stability about them.
I mean, they brought Robbie Hooker in last season, and things sort of ended up working out. But this season has, I mean, Hooker's talked about it where it's like, well, it's a young squad. you know, there's going to be these sorts of issues, but like it's not like it gets easier for the Wanderers over the next few weeks. They've got Western United this Saturday as part of a doubleheader. They then welcome Perth Glory to Wanderers Football Park. Um, Stephen Peters has talked about how he considers every New South Wales game a home game for the Glory, and is trying to put that mentality onto the players. Um, and then they where do they have it? And then they travel to Adelaide to play the Reds, who are incredibly high flying. And then it's and then it's the Phoenix at Wanderers Football Park again. So it's not like they've got an easy schedule coming up to try and salvage something from this season. I don't know. I think to answer the question, depending on your definition of purgatory, I think the answer is yes. But it's so hard because the club has so much in the way of resources, and yet it never seems to be able to do anything with them on the women's side, last season notwithstanding. I really don't know how this sort of solves itself for the Wanderers, and because it's a question that needs to be answered sooner rather than later by those at the club.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's the answer? I mean, it's a bit of a tricky situation, isn't it? Because, like I said, you see signs that okay, they can be a good side, and then the week after they just put in like one of the worst performances you've ever seen, right? So, like I said, looking long term, it's just about you know, finding that structure and putting that plan in place, right? You've got your coach, you've got Robbie Hooker at the helm. Like, all right, keep him. Try and plan what are your ambitions for the next 2 to 3 years. What players does he want to bring in? How does he want to build maybe around Sophie Harding, for example? Like these types of players, keep them for the long term. Try and build something at the club. I just think it has to be more of a long term vision and project that they've got to aspire towards instead of, things sort of breaking up here and there. There just needs to be some, I guess, consistency about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not the last time we'll ask that sort of question throughout the season. But that will do for this episode of the Dubcast, part of the Roundball Australia podcasting network. Christian, thank you so much for joining us.
No worries at all.
And thank you to Burke, who, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, has had to drop out of the call. But we'll be back next week on Wednesday, as we always are. Just a reminder to like, share, subscribe if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Leave us a rating on Spotify or Apple, wherever you're tuning in. And we put the call out every week for questions, or you can leave them in the comments of the YouTube video if you're watching on YouTube. We'd absolutely, we want more of your questions. So by all means, please feel free to ask whatever it is you want, and we'll answer all of the good ones here on the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.